So they're telling us that O is a circle and that NOG is congruent to POG. So let's write that in. NOG is right here, is congruent to POG, which is right here. So we're going to write that in there. Those angles are congruent. So let's start writing our given. So there's our given, our two givens. And the first thing to point out again, I always suggest that you come up with a game plan. They want us to show that RO bisects. So a lot of times I'll even write it at the bottom. RO bisects NRP. So I look at my graph and my picture, here's NRP. I want to show that this bisects that. Whoops. RO bisects that one. So how do I do that? Well, I'm going to eventually have to show what? That those two are equal, right? Because then that would mean that it bisects it. And in order to show that those two angles are equal, probably, and this is just a guess, I'm going to have to show that these two triangles are equal. Why? Because I've done many of these problems, and that's almost always what you have to do, is show that two triangles are equal, and then CPCTC, corresponding parts of congruent triangles, are congruent. And that's where you're going to get your answer. So how am I going to do that? Well, notice the only thing they've given me two things. They've told me it's a circle, which means what if it's a circle? I know the radii are equal, so I know NO and OP are equal to each other. So I'm definitely going to write that in somewhere. Look what I have here. I've got my reflexive angle there, or side there, sorry. And what else do I know? Well, if I know these two things are equal to each other, then can't I show that these two things are equal to each other also? Those angles are equal to each other? Isn't there some property that I can use to show that? So I'm looking through my list of properties. I'm thinking through all the things I've used before. I'm thinking, how can I show that those angles are equal to each other? And if I do that, do I have enough information? I do, because I have a side, angle, side, angle, side. And I will then have that two triangles are congruent. And then I could say that since the triangles are congruent, the angles are congruent. If the angles are congruent, that means it bisects it because of the definition of bisects. So I'm thinking in my head of all the things that I'm trying to do before I even get started on writing much more down. All right, so got our strategy? Let's go about and do it. Here we go. So number 2, let's first of all establish that NO, this is the most obvious thing, isn't it? Is congruent to OP. And I think one of our properties we have is all radii in a circle are congruent. Yeah. I can use that. So again, you have to look at your list of things that they tell you in your class that you can use. And for this particular class at this school, they say that you can say all radii are equal. All radii are congruent or equal. Got it? All right. For 3, let's just get it over with, and let's say that OR equals OR. Got it? Actually, you know what? No, let's not say that first. Because usually what's good to do is you got side, I want angle, and then I want side. Usually it's good to put it in the order that you're going so that when you say SAS, you kind of look back at your proof and you see the reasons for it. So let's find that angle first. Well, like we talked about, we have that angle is equal to that angle that was given. And so can't we say, isn't there some property that says that supplements of congruent angles are congruent? So this next step, what I'm going to say is I'm just going to go straight to angle NOR is congruent to angle ROP. That's these two things I just wrote here. And I'm going to say assume supplement from diagram. I'm going to say that first in case they want me to say that. And then I'm going to say the property that they gave you that you can use, which is supplements of congruent angles are congruent. Supplements of congruent angles are congruent. Okay, so again, they may or may not have wanted, your teacher may or may not have wanted you to say that, and maybe even to list it as a separate step, but I'm just going to do it all in one because there's lots of steps here. Got it?
What did you get NOR?
So again, what did I take? I took these supplements right here. Oops. These supplements right here. See how that adds up to 180? That's a straight angle. And see how that adds up to 180? So these two right here, let me change the color to blue. This is NOR, and this is ROP. NOR, ROP. And I did supplements of congruent angles are congruent. That's one of the properties that they're allowing us, or theorems rather. That's one of the theorems that they're allowing us to use, or a reason that they're allowing us to use. Okay, so I've established a side, I've established an angle, and now I have to establish my third side. So I established this side and this side, this angle and this angle, and now let's get this third side right here. OR is congruent to what? OR is congruent to what? What am I going to write? OR is congruent to OR. It's the duh property, which is called reflexive. Something is congruent to itself. You're doing that because you're establishing, again, side, angle, side. So now number 5, I'm going to write out, being very careful, my side angle side triangle congruency is NOR is congruent to, if I started with N, I have to start with P, right? Make sure you start with the same thing. POR. NOR is congruent to POR. That's because of side angle side. Now number 6, I'm going to say, since that's true, this angle right here and this angle right here are congruent to each other. Why? Because corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. That's a property that we can use when we're doing these. It's something we use all the time when we're finding that. So I'm going to say that angle, and again, be careful naming it, angle NRO is congruent to, so I started NRO, so I have to start at PRO to angle PRO. Got it?
What does CPCTC mean?
So now number 7, as I'm going to say, I can actually go straight to this because your reason on your piece of paper says that you have a reason that says if 2 congruent angles, then bisects is all your teacher makes you write. If you have 2 congruent angles, then the line between them bisects them. They let you use that property. There's a property that they gave you that says exactly that. So I don't have to say anything else between that step in your class. Now, if you had a different teacher or a different book or a different curriculum that wanted you to list out everything more succinctly, you might have to say something else. But usually they'll give you properties, and once they establish those properties, they'll hand them to you on a piece of paper and say, hey, use this as a shortcut for your reasons from now on.